A cold morning breeze carried a metallic scent that seemed to hang over the valley, where an ancient stone structure rose against the gray sky. It was a place forgotten by time, known only to the oldest inhabitants of the region as the Silent Circle. Laya adjusted her backpack as she observed the etched markings on the stones, inscriptions she couldn't decipher, but which seemed to vibrate with an almost imperceptible force. Beside her, Luis unfurled a yellowed map. His fingers traced faint lines connecting unknown points. They had been drawn there by fragments of stories heard in taverns and abandoned libraries. Rumors of something buried beneath that earth that could change everything they knew about the world. With each step towards the center of the circle, the air grew denser, as if they were entering a space where the natural laws began to distort. A shiver ran down her spine when a slight tremor in the ground beneath their feet caused them to exchange a worried glance. He murmured something about anomalous magnetic fields, but his voice was swallowed by the distant sound of winds that seemed to come from nowhere. In the ensuing silence, both sensed that something was watching them, though no one was in sight. Later, as they set up camp on the edges of the valley, Laya began organizing her notes. She had recorded strange patterns in the vegetation around the Silent Circle, plants growing in impossible shapes, curved as if obeying an unseen energy. Luis was busy adjusting sensitive equipment he had brought to measure variations in the local magnetic field. He explained that he had read similar accounts in an obscure scientific article, written decades ago by a researcher whose name was now little more than a whisper in university corridors. The man spoke of magnetic vortices arising at specific points on the planet, phenomena that seemed to concentrate energy in incomprehensible ways. As he spoke, Laya noticed his hands trembling slightly, though he tried to disguise it. She considered asking what troubled him, but something in his manner made her hesitate. Instead, she focused on a small compass she had brought with her. The needle spun incessantly, unable to point to a fixed direction. This should have been impossible, but there, in that place, nothing seemed to follow normal rules. As night fell, the stars seemed to flicker erratically, as if observed by an unstable veil. That's when they heard the sound. A low hum that seemed to emanate from the ground beneath their feet. Laya and Luis looked at each other again, this time without words, both understanding that this was only the beginning. At dawn, they decided to explore the surrounding terrain more deeply. Laya suggested following a moss trail that seemed to move slowly, as if drawn by some hidden force. Luis hesitated, but eventually agreed, though he insisted on bringing one of the portable detectors. As they advanced, the air grew heavier, and the sounds of the forest around them seemed to dissipate, replaced by an oppressive silence. Then they found the first concrete clue, a rusted metal plate, half buried in the ground. It was covered in inscriptions reminiscent of the markings on the circle stones, but there was something more, something that looked like a warning. Laya tried to translate some words, but they didn't make complete sense, as if written in a language that never fully existed. Luis suggested photographing the plate and continuing, but Laya felt an inexplicable compulsion to dig deeper. Using a small shovel, she began to remove the earth around the plate, revealing a larger structure beneath. It appeared to be part of an underground formation, something that had perhaps been intentionally sealed. As she dug, she noticed Luis was paralyzed. His detector emitted a high-pitched sound that echoed through the area. He muttered something about abnormal radiation levels, but his voice was laced with a panic she had never heard before. They decided to return to camp to assess what they had found. During the return journey, Laya couldn't stop thinking about the implications of their discovery. If that structure was truly as ancient as it seemed, it meant someone already knew about the magnetic vortex long before any modern technology existed. But who? And why seal something beneath the earth with such care? When they reached camp, Luis immediately began analyzing the collected data, while Laya flipped through an old notebook she had bought from a traveling merchant weeks earlier. The pages contained drawings and descriptions of rock formations resembling the Silent Circle, but also references to rare celestial events, such as planetary alignments and total eclipses. She wondered if these events could be connected to the vortex's operation. As she pondered, an unsettling idea began to take shape in her mind. What if the vortex wasn't just a natural phenomenon, but something deliberately created? Perhaps even controlled by someone or something. This possibility terrified her, but also fascinated her. When she shared her theories with Luis, he seemed torn between scientific excitement and growing concern. He mentioned that certain ancient cultures believed places like this were portals to other worlds or dimensions. Laya laughed nervously, but couldn't shake the feeling that there might be some basis to that idea. The next day, they returned to the excavation site, determined to discover more. This time, they brought more robust tools and safety equipment. As they dug deeper, they began to find strange artifacts. Fragments of pottery with intricate geometric patterns, pieces of metal that seemed to resist corrosion, and even bones that didn't appear to belong to any known animal. Each new discovery increased the feeling that they were about to uncover something monumental. But it also sparked a growing unease. Laia began to notice that certain objects seemed to shift position when she wasn't directly looking at them, as if they had a life of their own. Luis, on the other hand, was obsessed with a series of numbers that appeared repeatedly in his measurements. Sequences he couldn't explain, but which seemed to form some kind of code. He suggested they might be coordinates or instructions, but Laia had another theory. What if they were warnings? As night fell again, they lit lanterns and continued working, ignoring fatigue. That's when they heard a different sound, something that sounded like a distant voice echoing through the surrounding earthen walls. Both froze, unable to discern words, but clearly feeling that it was a message directed at them. Laia and Luis exchanged a long, silent look before deciding to continue digging, now with more urgency. The voice seemed to come from somewhere below them, growing closer as they progressed. Finally, after hours of grueling work, they found what appeared to be an entrance, a narrow passage descending even deeper into the earth. The air emanating from it was cold and damp, carrying a scent Laia couldn't identify, something between metal and something organic. They hesitated for a moment, both aware that crossing that entrance might be a point of no return. But curiosity and the need to understand what they were facing were stronger. With lanterns in hand, they began descending, each step echoing against the rough stone walls. As they went deeper, the symbols on the walls became more frequent, strangely illuminated by their lantern light. They seemed to respond to their movement, subtly changing shape as they passed. Laia felt a shiver, but said nothing, fearing to break the silence that now seemed charged with anticipation. The passage ended in a vast chamber, where a central structure pulsed with a soft light. It was a sphere suspended in mid-air, surrounded by slowly rotating metallic rings, as if obeying an unseen force. Laia and Luis approached cautiously, unable to look away from the scene. The sphere seemed alive, responding to their presence with slight fluctuations in its light intensity. Luis began recording everything frantically, while Laia felt a strange connection to the object, as if trying to communicate. She hesitantly reached out, and when her fingers touched the sphere's surface, a wave of energy surged through her body. Images flooded her mind, glimpses of alien landscapes, ancient civilizations, and events that seemed to belong to another time. She heard voices, thousands of them speaking languages she didn't understand, but which somehow made sense. When she finally recoiled, gasping, she realized Luis was pale, looking at her with a mixture of fear and awe. He asked what she had seen, but Laia couldn't answer. All she could say was that it would change everything they knew about the world, and perhaps not everyone was ready for that truth. Emerging from the subterranean chamber, they were greeted by a gray light signaling dawn. The fresh air outside felt strangely heavy compared to the ethereal atmosphere they had just left behind. Laia felt her mind filled with images and sensations she couldn't yet organize, while Luis carried the collected data, though his face showed a growing internal conflict. He murmured something about how this could be dangerous if it fell into the wrong hands, but Laia only nodded absently, still trying to process what she had experienced touching the sphere. They walked in silence on their way back to camp, each immersed in their own thoughts. The weight of their discovery felt heavier than their backpacks. Laia felt as if she had carried a part of that sphere with her, an invisible burden that couldn't be easily left behind. Luis, in turn, seemed to be struggling with a decision he knew was inevitable, to reveal or conceal what they had found. After all, truth was something that could change the world, but it could also destroy it. That same day, as the sun slowly rose over the valley, Laia decided to write a letter. Not to anyone specific, but to record everything that had happened, so that if she couldn't return, someone could understand. As she wrote, she heard a whisper in the wind, almost imperceptible, that seemed to echo the words she was writing. She looked around, but saw nothing but trees and the gray sky. The feeling of being watched returned with force, and this time, she couldn't deny she was right. The next day, before leaving, they made a final check at the site. The metal plate was still there, but now it seemed less rusted, as if cleaned by unseen hands. The chamber entrance was closed, but not with earth. It seemed to have been sealed by a force they didn't understand. As they turned to leave, Laia was certain that this wasn't the end. Something within that structure still awaited, and perhaps, one day, it would be ready to be discovered again.